Hello, everyone, and welcome to Modern Analytics Academy Vignettes. My name is Alan Kleinert, and I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect for Global Partner Solutions here at Microsoft. Today's topic will be around Synapse Managed Virtual Network. If you're new to vignettes in general, please feel free to reach out to aka.ms/MAA for further information around the program, as well as to explore additional content. The agenda for today as it pertains to Synapse Managed Virtual Network will include a quick overview of the capability. We'll go over some reference architecture diagrams to illustrate how that's shaped out. We'll go over some key advantages of the feature. And then notable mentions is really that FYI gotcha type scenario. So some pertinent information there. I'll be doing a demo to show you exactly how to configure the environment and how to use it. And then lastly, the resources will be some additional links and information to help you further your knowledge at your own leisure. Let's get into the overview for Synapse Managed Virtual Network. I always like to start with a few questions. What is it? When would I use it? And why use it? So what is it? A managed virtual network is a networking feature within Azure Synapse Analytics that enables secure and private communication between Azure resources. Keywords being between Azure resources. So this is going to be Azure to Azure. It allows for the creation of a virtual network that's fully managed by Synapse, which ensures network isolation and enhanced security. So when would we use this? Right. Oftentimes, we see customers and partners create solutions that contain sensitive data. To limit risk of such data for data breaches and security threats, it's important to isolate services and reduce overall exposure. We might do that with network isolation or different techniques for segmentation, also known as public network closed off. So why use it? When public network is closed off, right, the overhead and management of such a configuration is a lot, right? It's complex, it's cumbersome, etc. So by using managed virtual network, we can lessen that workload, we can make it easier, and it can make it safer and more secure and more sustainable. A second important reason revolves around the idea of the integration runtimes as it pertains to Synapse pipelines. So in previous configurations without a managed virtual network, you would have to use or leverage a self-hosted integration runtime, which would be an integration runtime installed on a virtual machine or physical machine that would open up that trusted communication. And so if you have Azure services, like let's say a storage account or Azure SQL DB that have internet turned off or public off with private endpoints, right, the only way to get to those would be through that self-hosted integration runtime. So not only is that more overhead and management and installations and configuration and so forth, but it's also not scalable. So if you have a big data problem or if you want to use data flow, you're at the mercy of the capacity of that virtual machine. So one of the biggest benefits of Synapse Managed Virtual Network is that it now allows you to use the Azure native integration runtime, which gives you that full scale, pay by the SIP, and will meet your needs of the use case at play. So taking a look at the integration runtime a little bit further, it's helpful to understand where we've been, right? So some of this may look familiar. So like the upper left-hand corner, you have the SSIS lift and shift integration runtime. We usually see that in a virtual network with private endpoints. So pretty basic setup or common setup, I should say. The left bottom hand of the screen is really the default open to the public. So Synapse SQL database storage account, all open, and therefore gets to use the Azure native integration runtime. and it's fully scalable, pay by the SIP model to meet the needs of the use case or the demand. To the right in the orange dotted box, you're going to see the on-prem environment. And typically we see a self-hosted integration runtime, and that's the integration runtime service installed on a virtual machine, sometimes a physical machine, in order to make that trusted communication. So what used to happen that's troublesome is this bottom right hand picture. Right, so you have all these services in Azure PaaS in this instance. So Synapse Analytics with SQL pools, serverless pools. You have SQL databases. You have storage accounts. So you have all these things, but the internet needs to be turned off. So public turned off, and you have everything set up with private endpoints and virtual networks. But in order to access that data with Synapse pipelines, you would need to reach out to a self-hosted integration runtime. Again, that's a virtual machine with limited capacity. And so the problem with that is if you're doing heavy big data loads or complex loads or high demand loads, or you want to use data flow and it has some different Spark on it, this virtual machine isn't scalable, right? So it's more likely it's going to be a bottleneck to your operations. And so that's what the managed virtual network aims to solve, or one of the big pieces. So we go from this integration runtime situation that you see on the screen to this setup for managed virtual network. And so you can see, on the left side for external or on-prem, you still see self-hosted integration runtime, and that's A-OK. The managed virtual network will not replace self-hosted integration runtime for on-prem connectivity. What it will replace is connecting Azure to Azure. So when you stand up a Synapse workspace with Managed Virtual Network, you have the option to already create the managed private endpoints for dedicated pool and SQL pool. But then on top of that, you can create managed endpoints or private endpoints to your other services at play. So in this case, a storage account. So you can see it's created that trusted connection to a storage account, and I'll go over that in the demo. But the beauty of it is now Synapse Pipeline gets to use the Azure native integration runtime. And so all of its workloads, copies, Spark, etc., can be fully scalable, leveraging the Azure native integration runtime. On top of that, right, the managed VNet is going to take care of all the Spark isolation as well. So this is the new setup, and it reduces the complexity of the network config overhead, as well as allow the integration runtime to scale. So you're no longer bottlenecked with self-hosted integration runtime. Some key advantages of leveraging Synapse Managed Virtual Networks is basically, what we've talked about before, is offloading the overhead of implementing virtual networks and private endpoints in such a complex ecosystem like Synapse. So you no longer need NSG rules, as the managed virtual network takes care of all that work for you. Even when it comes to the Spark clusters, Spark pools, it has its own um, subnet. It's all managed, all taken care of for you, which reduces complexity significantly. And then in general, right, the managed private endpoints protects against data exfiltration in a big way. So the trusted handshake approval process using Microsoft's backbone really gives you the utmost protection. And lastly, the Synapse pipelines can leverage native Azure integration runtime versus the self-hosted integration runtime. So this allows data processing to be scalable, right, and give you the compute and processing you need for the demand. Some notable mentions to pay attention to: the managed virtual network has to be spun up during deployment for Synapse Workplace. or it can't be used. And also, once the managed virtual network is in place in a Synapse workplace, you can't remove it. So, pretty black and white there. Also, the dedicated and serverless SQL pools, since they are multi-tenant capabilities, they're actually separated from the managed virtual network, and they will be connected to the managed virtual network via private link or the managed private endpoints. Just a heads up that this managed virtual network exists in both Azure Data Factory and Synapse pipelines, so we know that they're almost identical. And so I just want to make a note that you can use these in both. And then lastly, a good point to make is that managed virtual network does not solve your problems for on-prem sources, right? So you're still going to need that self-hosted integration runtime for connectivity. Alrighty, so we made it to the demo portion of the vignette. Within this demo, I'm going to show you how to set up a Synapse Managed Virtual Network. And then once that's set up, we're going to go ahead and create a managed private endpoint to a storage account. So I'm going to show you how that handshake process happens and how you get it set up. So the first thing that we're going to do is go through the setup of creating a Synapse workspace with a managed virtual network. So this has to be done on deployment. So whether it's via portal or whatever DevOps deployment strategy you have, Bicep, ARM, etc., it has to be done and enabled during deployment. You can't do it after the fact. So I've already created some storage accounts and a Synapse workspace to save some time for setting up the managed private endpoints. However, we're going to go through how would you create and set up that deployment for a managed virtual network. So we go to create, go to Synapse. I'm going to go to create, and we can just say, Synapse demo for fun, something like that. I'm East US. And go ahead and use the account that was created. So get the account name, file system name, security. We'll use Azure Active Directory. Now, if you had a storage account that had public access turned off, you could actually check this box, select that storage account, and it will do the network access and network access rules for you, which is pretty nice. In this case, we don't need to do that. So you can use TDE, bring your own key with customer managed key, but we're not going to do that. So here's the main part, right? So you have managed virtual network. We need to enable that here. We have some options once that happens. So create managed private endpoint to primary storage account. Yes, that's usually the default. Allow outbound data traffic only to approved targets. So manage private endpoints. Uh, that's up to your security compliance or requirements. So right now we'll just leave it no. Public network access to or public network access to workspace endpoints. Right now, we'll leave that enabled. However, more than likely, if you're going through this process, you'll eventually want it disabled. So all the workspace is turned off. You would then use private endpoints to access the workspaces. So then that's it. We would review and create, and it would validate, and then we would create. So let's assume all that uh, went well, and we're moving on to the next step. So how would we create a managed private endpoint in order to connect to a secure storage account? So you can see out of the box, we don't have any private endpoints created. To access the managed virtual network, we're going to go into the Open Synapse Studio here, log in. And at the very bottom left, you're going to see this toolbox with the wrench in it. We're going to click Manage. And we can check out a couple of different things here. So one, the integration runtime that we talked about before. You can see subtype managed virtual network, and then it's the auto resolve integration runtime. So it's the cloud runtime. So all the workloads that we run are going to be able to run with scale. It can meet the needs of our use cases. So if you've done it right, you should see this manage private endpoints available. If you haven't done it right, you'll probably see it grayed out or missing. This is the landing page for managed private endpoints. As you can see, there's already some managed private endpoints that are created, such as the serverless SQL pool, the storage account that's associated with the Synapse workspace. I already went ahead and created a storage account, managed private endpoint for a storage account that I turned public access off called secure storage. Um, the reason I did this is to save time, since sometimes the handshake process takes between 5 and 10 minutes. But if we were to mimic what I did with the secure storage, we could certainly do that as an example. So what you would do is click New. In this case, it's ADLS Gen 2. We can just call it Test. And the storage account is Demo Test. So we create this. And then it's going to go into this provisioning state and eventually send a request out to that storage account for approval. Once the approval takes place, then the trust and communication goes forward. All right, so we can see the approval state is in pending. So we need to go to this storage account. So if I go back here, the demo test, networking, private endpoints, I'm going to see this request that came through that's in pending state. And so in order for this trusted communication to happen, I need to approve it. So I'm going to approve it. And on this end, it happens pretty quickly. As you can see, approved. But like I said before, on this side of the house, it can take much longer. So we have secure storage, managed private endpoint in place. Let's go ahead and see if we can access the storage account uh, like we believe. So we'll go ahead and create a pipeline, and we'll just do a simple copy job here. And we'll do a new data set, which is going to be ADOS Gen 2, JSON. We're going to have to create a new linked service here. And we'll pick our storage account, which is secure for demo. And it's going to load that managed private endpoint for you and give you the status of that managed private endpoint that's associated with the storage account you chose. So all this looks pretty good. We're going to test that connection. If all is well, it's going to be successful. So we can go ahead and create the link service. Perfect. Then we're going to see if we can preview some of the data, and we can. So room JSON, perfect. And if we preview the data, hopefully we'll see some JSON, and we do. Again, this is a storage account where internet is completely turned off. So we go to secure for demo, networking, public network access. Everything's disabled, completely turned off. You can see the private endpoint that I created and approved. So all is well here. Now we were able to see the data because of this and only because of this. So if I go ahead and reject this, because for some reason, something came up and this isn't right, I'm gonna go ahead and reject it. When I go back and I want to preview the data now, because that private link doesn't exist, this should fail. So we'll give it just a few minutes to fail. And there we go. And it's basically saying, hey, you can't connect to it at all. It's possible, private endpoint, etc. So that's the gist of setting up Synapse Managed Virtual Network and how you would set up managed private endpoints. Again, this only applies for Azure to Azure. The last agenda item for this vignette session is around resources. I've posted a few links for those who have interest in learning more about managed virtual networks. Aside from that, I'm going to close this vignette session. I'd like to thank everybody who was able to consume and definitely hopes that everyone's able to take something valuable out of this. So appreciate the time and thank you.